Hey, I'm Pastor Rhonda.
And I'm Pastor Seth.
You're listening to Growing Hope,
Living Faith. Well, welcome back to Growing Hope, Living Faith podcast. We are so glad that you are listening in on our podcast today here with Pastor Rhonda. And it's a little bit later in the evening.
If you hear me yawning, you will know.
I know. I'm drinking
Pastor
coffee.
Seth's going to carry this, and you'll be hearing me snoring.
Oh, no. I'm not carrying this.
I'm a morning person.
You're going to be carrying this one because you're going to be preaching it this coming up Sunday.
Yes, I am preaching this Sunday at Rome Church of the Nazarene. Pastor Dee Dee and her husband Tim are co-pastors there, and they are leading our district adult retreat. It used to be called the layman's retreat,
right.
But anyway, it's for laymen and pastor, whoever wants to go. They planned a great weekend. So I am filling in, and my friend, I keep calling her my friend like she's nobody else's. I caught myself doing that Saturday. Her name is Jeanne, and she's been listening to our podcast, and she's just a wonderful person.
Yes.
And so Mark introduced me, my pastor Mark Amspaw at Dalton First. He introduced me to her, and I was just kind of like taking her away. So we went to this preaching workshop, and I was introducing her to everybody. This is Jeanne, my friend. And Mark's just standing there like, what happened? I was like, oh, wait, she's your friend too.
That's
but
right.
Anyway, Jeanne will be filling in for me at Dalton.
Yes.
And you guys, I don't think we'll be there. So
yeah, we're out of town.
We're going to be going out of town. Maybe it's just that, little fling before cold weather gets here. But I think a lot of people are going out of town. So.
Yeah, we'll be in Lexington. So we're going to a wedding. Morgan's cousin's getting married. And so we're leaving Friday morning. We're recording this on a Wednesday night. But we're leaving Friday morning early. And the kids had a half day. Morgan was supposed to do a full day, but she just took the day off. And so we'll travel up and be there, and it'll be good. So it'll be a lot of fun. Then we'll come back on Sunday and jump into another week, so which will be fun. So yeah. So what else been going on? Earlier we were talking, and you were talking about how your daughter has a snake now, and so tell us about some of their adventures they've had with their snake this week.
Yeah. So my daughter, they have 3 kids, and so I got a text in church today. And she's like, we can't find Johnny. And at first I forgot that the snake had a name. I'm not a snake person, but I was like, remember my story? I couldn't find Baron,
right.
And I was like, wait, I was thinking, do they have a friend over and she's lost this kid? And I was like, oh, that is the snake. And that kind of terrifies me. I don't know what kind it is. They got it at a pet store, so it's supposed to be safe around children. But I would say if they're locked up, they're safe around children.
Yeah.
But so a while later, they found it under their washing machine. Can you imagine? That would terrify me.
Yeah.
So
it's a python, so I would imagine. That's what you were saying. You think it's a python. And I'm not a snake person either. So
well, I will say I am more of a snake person than I am a bee person. I'm terrified of bees. If I were to be out in the woods and see bees or a snake, I'd rather see a snake any day.
Yeah, no, I don't know which one I would rather come face to face with. I'm not sure. So not sure. Yeah. So I just got done. A couple hours ago now, but walked out of the airplane. So I went flying tonight and flew up to Cleveland, Tennessee, and then flew over to Signal Mountain, kind of flew down into the Chattanooga area over the city, and then kind of back to the airport. It was a real short flight. So, usually, if you're driving to Cleveland, Tennessee, it's probably a lot shorter of a drive for you. But, you're looking at 35 minutes maybe. When I took off from the airport, I think it took me like 16 minutes to get up there to Cleveland, Tennessee. So,
wow,
which is
and
just
you
crazy.
touched down there, right?
Yeah, so I landed there. Yep, landed there, and then we took back off, and then, like I said, flew over to kind of Signal Mountain, flew down 27 and into downtown Chattanooga, and then kind of took a hard left, heading east, back over to the airport, and landed over there. Had some smooth landings. Nobody was in the plane with me, so that's generally when you get like your smoothest landings is when there's nobody to witness it or to see it. And but I had 2 pretty good landings, and so it was good. It was a lot of fun. and still enjoying that for sure. So, but
Yeah.
I am excited about the passage. Like I said, you're going to be preaching this passage this
Yeah.
week at Rome, and so we were kind of just diving through it. And there's so much meat on the bone when it comes to this
Yes.
passage.
Yeah, and I was at a preaching workshop this past weekend, and the professor, he's at Trevecca. It's Dr. Jackson, and he said if a passage does not slay you as a preacher, then you really have nothing to say. And I have felt this one this week.
Yeah.
It's been all over my toes, and when you go in to preach as a guest preacher, it's hard to kind of know like what have you heard recently. I don't want the passage you heard last week. So, my first thought was, oh, this is a great opportunity just to jump into one of my favorite Bible stories. I just, I'm excited about sharing the stories that I love. And I love John 21 where Jesus cooks breakfast. And, that's a great story. But I just felt like the Lord was saying, well, why don't you look at the lectionary because you're going to be, podcasting. So,
Yeah.
when I looked at it and I was like, wow, man, this is hard stuff. And I think that's what we've talked about in the book of James. It is so straightforward, and he's speaking to brothers and sisters. So he's speaking to believers. And he just raises the bar about watching your tongue and just, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago about your faith and how that works with grace. How when you've been saved by grace, you're gonna have works that come out of that.
Right.
So it's a difficult book in the sense of it really kind of taps, on some of the places in your heart that needs addressing from time to time, and all of us. Yeah. So this passage is about wisdom, and I've had to stop and think, well, what is wisdom? What's the difference between wisdom and knowledge? And knowledge, is different in the sense it's information, but wisdom, godly wisdom, is having the knowledge of heaven to apply it in your earthly life. And so I've been trying to think of it like that. And according to James, there's only two sources of wisdom. It's heavenly or earthly. And that's it. It's like, well, which camp am I falling in? Am I living my life in a way that could be described as heavenly wisdom or earthly wisdom? So it's, like I said, it's been one of those passages that's really kind of brought me to my knees. I'll admit that, and just, really search my own heart. And, but that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah. We all need those humility moments, I think, in our life. And that remembrance of, our humanity and the reality of, we do need that godly wisdom. And, what's so potentially dangerous about wisdom, and I know that's a crazy word to use, is dangerous. But the wisest guy in the scriptures, and we may have talked about this, but essentially Solomon, who asked for wisdom, essentially his wisdom that he got was his downfall. It became his downfall because he was no longer using it for the reality of the glory of God, but he did turn it to how can this benefit myself? And that's really what this passage talks about. Right. So this idea in James is not just an idea that we see in the book of James, but man, this is actually something that we see really all over Scripture on a very deep level, that people have wisdom, they have thoughts, they have ideas. And the question is, what do we do with that wisdom? Like you said, how do we apply it? What does the application look like? And the kingdom always asks us the question, I think, of our why. What's our motive? What is going to be your motive? And I love that this passage really points to that, because I think it simplifies it on such a deep level. When we tend to, I think, overcomplicate things, right. Especially when it comes to wisdom, like we are always asking, I think, for wisdom on, how do we need wisdom for this, to make this decision, to make this choice or whatever. And I think he essentially just really, I think, simplifies it a little bit which is good. I think we all need that in our lives.
Right. Right. Well, do you want to read the passage?
Yeah, I'll read the passage, and this is
Okay.
going to be coming from James. We're going to be jumping around just a little bit, but it's James 3, 13, and then going all the way to 4:3, and then jumping down to 7 and 8. But it reads like this: Who is wise and understandable among you? Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness born of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not be arrogant and lie about the truth. This is not wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, devilish. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there will also be disorder and wickedness of every kind. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Those conflicts and disputes among you, where do they come from? Do they not come from your cravings that are at war within you? You want something and do not have it, so you commit murder. And you covet something and cannot attain it, so you engage in disputes and conflicts. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and you do not receive because you ask wrongly, in order to spend what you get on your pleasures. Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you.
That's a verse we hear a lot. It's one of our favorites. Draw near to God and He'll draw near to you. But man, the rest of it's like, okay, let's unpack this. Jumping right out, who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life and by deeds done. So if you're wise, you're going to be doing wise things. You know, and it's interesting that James doesn't say, okay, who among you has the degrees and who among you know a little bit about everything. I don't know if you've ever been around somebody like that, but I had this one friend that he knew something about everything. You could be talking about politics, or you could be talking about I don't know, you could talk about space, and you could talk about medicine. It didn't matter what you talked about. He knew everything.
Right.
But that's James. He doesn't want to know who is the smartest person here, who is wise and understanding among you. Let them show it by their good life.
Yeah, and by the gentleness, I think this really points to Jesus, I think, on such a deep level. And obviously, you think of, the times of where he would, deal with the Pharisees and had a lot of kind of issues with those. And, we like to think of Jesus with the whip, cat of nine whips, and, the cat of tails or whatever, had the whip and driving people out of the temple. We like to think of that. But if you think about the reality of how Jesus interacted with the world, it was always with this gentleness. There was never this pushiness. There was never this, oh, you've got to do this, and I'm wise, so you've got to listen to me, and you got to be this, and you got to be that. But he was good to people, and he did it in gentleness, and he would touch people and speak into people's lives and interact with people and go eat meals with people, and he did all of this, and it was out of this gentleness in this life that showed the good works of the reality, and so that's what I love about that verse is that, to me, it points directly back to Jesus and the reality of how he lived in the world, not necessarily against the people in the church who were struggling, which I think obviously is what James talks about down the road.
Right. Well, Jesus was meek and lowly in heart, and we see that. And is it Philippians 2 where, I don't know, I might be wrong on that, but it's Philippians where it talks about how he put aside, even to the point of going to the cross, and we need to have that same attitude and that same mind as Christ Jesus. Yep. So you're right there. You're always right. You're right.
No, I'm not always right. I'm not.
I don't know why I said it like that. So if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, don't boast about it. Don't deny the truth. So this bitter envy, and envy is not a bad thing in and of itself. It's like being zealous, but man, when it's for the wrong things, and we can see that even in ministry, where people want a prominent place, or people want to be known, and those kind of things. And we have this competition and this selfish ambition, this agenda. We see that not just even out in the world necessarily, but we see that up close and personal all the time in Christian circles.
Absolutely.
But that's not good.
No, it's not. And, I think this is what Jesus dealt with the church on such a deep level, that there was this selfish ambition, there was this power, and, the church was using their power, for their gain. And, the Pharisees and the priests and the scribes, they wanted it to be a certain way. Plus they were lining their pockets and they were doing all that kind of stuff. And so, it very much happens today. Maybe how it happens more so in the church today is instead of being a voice for the voiceless, we're worried about, well, if I say this or do this, then what is going to happen to me? Am I going to lose power? Am I going to lose? So instead of doing the right thing and stepping up, that selfish ambition, even though, most people would look at it and say, well, they're just trying to keep their job, or they're just trying to whatever, that selfish ambition can actually creep in. And I don't think there is any potential thought of oh, this is not good, or this is evil. But the reality is it is when our selfish ambition and our desires and our, like I said, our bitterness and that envy, when those things come above the reality of living the good life and the gentleness and peace and all those things that we're getting ready to talk about, that's when the kingdom of God doesn't excel and it doesn't come forward. Right. And sometimes I think we live these things and we just don't have the eyes to actually see the reality that we're actually living these things.
Right. And it goes back again, there's only two sources of wisdom. Right. So this is, if it's not heavenly, then what is it? And I think that's what we see here, because he continues, such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but it's earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. That's kind of a scary word just to see there, to think selfish ambition being, in that category of demonic. But it's like he's saying human wisdom is just an expression of Satan's agenda. You know what I mean? It's more of, it's coming from that camp. And it seeks to please ourselves instead of pleasing God.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the big struggles, right? Is, are we going to live to our human nature, or are we going to live to God's nature? And, that's what we really define holiness as. Are we going to lay down our will, our way, our desires, our passions, our goals, or all those things, and put on the cross and put on the way of Jesus and put on Jesus? Or are we not going to? But the reality is like you said, there's these two options. One leads to kingdom living, and one leads to destruction. And that's what James says. It leads to destruction all around us. It leads to chaos. It leads to anything but the reality of the fullness of the kingdom of God, and the reality of peace and mercy and all those things in people's lives that the kingdom should be pushing us towards, and help us push others towards those things. When we have all of these things, it does the complete opposite, the reality of the way that Jesus calls us to live.
Right. And that's what you said. It's verse 16 there, you will find disorder. Yep. You're going to find, if you operate under that kind of wisdom, there's disorder and chaos and every evil practice. You're going to see total disarray when we operate under that wisdom.
Not just in your life, but in the life of the people around you as well.
Yeah, because everything we do affects everybody else. Right. We're not in a little bubble, but everything we do affects everybody else. But I love, and that's kind of the bad news. Right. We've seen the bad news, but now the good news. I love this. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is, first of all, pure, and then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. I might be reading from a different translation. I think I'm in the NIV over here.
That's all right.
But yeah, this idea of being pure and gentle, and even the word submissive, that's not one of my favorite words. I'll just be
Yeah.
honest, but it's just a willingness to yield, just a willing to take instructions, a willingness to be reasonable and just to listen and to, it's just the opposite of being obstinate and right. But that's a mark of heavenly wisdom is being submissive and impartial. And I love the full of mercy. Do we not need mercy nowadays? I mean, when I read this, I was like, oh man, you just throw this out
Yeah.
into my news feed,
Yeah.
and just I'm like, well, that's not wisdom from heaven. That's not, I just not to I'm trying to judge everybody else, but I've just been so convicted of like, man, this is what wisdom from heaven is. It is peace. It loves peace. It loves peace, and it's considerate.
Yep.
And I think we've kind of lost that in general, just of being considerate to one another.
Unfortunately, on a deep level, this really kind of pushes, and it's almost like the fruits of the Spirit, right? Like, we think of the fruits of the Spirit that Paul talks about, that, if we're going to live the life that God calls us to live, then these are going to be the sign bearers, or this is how you will know, essentially, is their lifestyle is going to look this way. And so this just very much, I think, is very similar to that, almost kind of James fruits of the Spirit. Hey, if you're living by the wisdom, then these are going to be the characteristics, essentially, that you're going to live out. And it's going to be, like you said, the mark, essentially, that shows that you are living in wisdom, which is awesome, because I think, once again, that gives us an opportunity for self-evaluation, for trying to be level-headed. And I think that's real wisdom, right? Like, that's what real wisdom is not that we are reactive or we're making decisions that we think are smart and wise, but the decisions that we make, or that we're going to make, we can look at them and we can say, yes, this is something that's going to bring peace. Or we can say, no, this is not going to bring peace. This is going to bring destruction. This is something that lives out full of mercy. Or no, like, this isn't showing mercy. And so I think that that's the reality of wisdom, is it allows us to look at decisions and to look at our life. And this sets us up to where we can begin to live that wisdom and know that the decisions that we are making are kingdom choices or not kingdom choices. And that's the beauty, I think, of this on such a deep level. But that's not easy, right? Like, not showing traces of partiality, and mine says hypocrisy, not living hypocrisy. Like that's so hard in the world that we live in today on such a deep level. And the church doesn't do very well. But verse 18, I think, really drives home the point. Like, the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. And it's like, if we could, once again, just somehow wrap our brains and our minds around that and really live that, and fully realize that the way of the kingdom is peace. It's pushing towards peace. It's making peace with others. It's making peace within ourselves, like pushing, peace within ourselves. Like, this is the way of the kingdom, and it is a mark of someone who is living the kingdom. And even going back to Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, like he says, blessed are the peacemakers. Like, there is this mentality of, man, we should be peacemakers, because Jesus says, for you will inherit the kingdom of God. Like, man, like, that's the reality of, like, the kingdom of God. It strives and it pushes towards peace. And if we're really living lives of righteousness, we're living peace, and we're also actively in the process of making peace around us. And that's not easy, but that's the mark and the call of the kingdom.
Right. And as you were saying that, I was just thinking about, mine says peacemakers that sow in peace. That's that kingdom, that's sowing into a field. But you reap a field of righteousness. But when I think about sowing the seeds of peace, you can't underestimate a seed, when you think about how, you put this little bitty tiny seed in the ground, and against all odds, it can push against the hard
Yeah.
earth and can move the ground and sprout up a plant. And that's the way it is when we're sowing seeds of peace. It may feel like, while it's buried, it may feel like that nobody knows, nobody's paying attention. And, you may feel like you're not making any progress. But what happens when those seeds really begin to sprout, and then you're going to reap this harvest of righteousness? I love that.
That's good. And it really, and he goes into conflict really in the church, is kind of the next thing that he talks about. But man, like, this should just challenge us on such a deep, deep, deep level, and our thought processes on a lot of different things. Like, this should wreck our reality of like war and what we think about war as a whole.
Exactly.
Like, this should wreck, like I said, just our relationships that we have with other people, and the harshness and sometimes the hardness that we have in relationships, not maybe like war on the global scale, but the wars that we have just within the relationships of the people that we're with. Like, this should just totally wreck us on such a deep, deep, deep level, and really should push us to think too, like, yes, it's awesome that we are peacemakers, but what do we do when we may not be the ones who are trying to create war with people around us, but people are essentially trying to create war with us, man? What does it mean to be a peacemaker in that situation, to be able to step into there? And I mean, that should wreck us on such a deep, deep, deep level, because it's so easy to think the reality of, well, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, or hey, we've got to fight back, or hey, and I'm not saying that pacifism is the way. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Passivity. But I'm not saying that the call is necessarily for us to lay down and to be doormats per se. But I think the kingdom does talk about this different way of, man, how do we approach people, and how do we approach people that want to do harm to us? And I don't think it should ever be our goal to desire for someone to hurt in my place. Does that kind of make sense? And that's hard.
Oh,
like,
it
that's
does.
really, really hard.
I can't believe, because a lot of things that you said is what I studied. One of my resources, I pull from a lot of commentaries and a lot of stuff, but I was reading one from Dr. Tony Evans, what his thoughts were with the chapter 4, verse 1, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from the desires? Da, da, da. And then verse 2, you desire, but you do not have, so you kill. You covet, but because you can't get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you don't ask of God. But what Tony Evans said, I thought really goes right along with what you said. The human heart manufactures desires, usually selfish ones. When somebody keeps you from satisfying a desire, you are tempted to view that person as an obstacle to be overcome, as an enemy to be defeated. And then murder is, we think that we kill people, like literally, but it starts in the heart, he says. And he says, we declare war on our brothers and sisters, when we should just ask God for the things that we don't have. So a lot of what you just said was kind of the same thing about, we sometimes it all goes back down to the desires in our hearts. And when somebody's a threat to what we want, we declare war on them, or they declare war on us. And it just shouldn't be, because we should, he tells us we have not because we ask not. But then when we do ask, we ask with the wrong motives, because we don't care about advancing God's kingdom. We just want our own pleasures. We're not thinking about how will God's program be advanced, or how, not his program, but his kingdom, how will what I want further the kingdom, or is it just something that's just going to make me happy temporarily, and I just think it all goes back to exactly what you just said.
Yeah. Well, once again, even to the point of death, remember, he's writing to the early church, and the early church is, there's a struggle, that they are being persecuted on a much deeper level than we've ever been persecuted ever before. And I think James is, once again, he's calling people to this different type of wisdom, this different type of realization. Like, the wisdom is the reality of, like, we have a hope, like we have something to live for. But the reality is as people maybe causing destruction in our lives, I think the hope that we should have is that they would somehow experience the hope that we have. Does that kind of make sense? And we see that within the reality of Jesus. Like, Jesus on the cross says, praise Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, right? Like, don't hold this against them. The reality, like, Jesus knows this isn't the end for him. How can Stephen pray that as he's being stoned, he prays the very thing that essentially Jesus prays, Father, do not hold this against him. As he is losing his life, he is praying because he has a hope for them, the ones who are doing the very destruction, the chaos to him. He has a hope that they will experience the reality. If it's not in this moment, then hopefully down the road, they're going to be able to have this opportunity. And we're such individual thinkers and such internal thinkers, and we're so worried about self-preservation that we can't really live this wisdom because we are so concerned about our rights and our things that we think are their right to life, our right to whatever. But this wisdom calls us to this different way of living. And when we live into this different way, it doesn't matter if someone is doing something destructive to me. I'm not going to do something destructive back because I have a hope that what I have, they're hopefully going to be able to experience, and someone's going to speak in their life down the road. And they're going to experience the very thing that I have, because I know that this isn't the end. And we just don't live that way in America anymore. Like, we don't have this wisdom. And like I said, I think this is the wisdom, like, and that, I think that is true wisdom, is having that bigger picture where it's not about self-preservation and it's not about what someone else has, but man, I am willing even to die, even if someone else, as long as someone else and that person that might be doing damage, they have an opportunity, hopefully down the road, to experience Christ and to maybe have a heart change to where they allow God to do something in their heart. And it's like, that's a hard place to be at, like a really, really hard place to be at, because like everything within us says, hey, we have a right to defend ourselves. And there's laws in America that's, you have a right to defend yourself. When someone says something bad to you, you say something bad back, or you feel like you have to defend yourself. And it's like, no, wisdom is not that I have to defend myself for my self-preservation. Wisdom is, you know what, even in the midst of you being and doing something bad to me, I am still going to treat you with mercy and grace and love and peace, and try to instill peace in your life, because I have something that is so much bigger. And you can do whatever you want to do to me, but man, I'm still going to show you love, and I'm going to show you grace, and I'm going to show you mercy, because I want you to experience the very thing that I have. And I know that if you end my life, this isn't the end. Like, you know, my wife and I, we have these conversations all the time. Like, man, what if somebody comes in with a gun? Like, could you do something what would you do to protect yourself? What would you do? And like, at the end of the day, I'm just have to, like, I tell her, I was like, I can't kill someone, because I know that for me, the hope that I have and the beliefs and faith that I have is, if something happens to me, it's going to stink. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, but it just means that I get to whatever else is beyond, you know, like that much sooner. And it's like that person, they're still living in that selfishness, that selfish ambition. They're still struggling. And I want them to experience that hope, you know, here on earth too. And so it's just like, it's a hard struggle. It's a hard conversation. And I think that this really dives deep into what is wisdom and that righteousness being lived out. And I just talked way too much, but I'll throw it back over to you.
That's good. No, it's so good, because what we talked about before is that wisdom is also a skill. And it's something that, you know, just like the fruits of the spirit, the love, joy, peace, you know, you may be doing well in one area, and then the Lord taps you in the heart and says, hey, we need to work on this patience and this faithfulness issue now. And it's the same way. So we may be peace loving, and we may be gentle, and we might be those kind of things. But then when it comes to being impartial or sincere, you know, those are skills that we learn. And James tells us how we do that.
Yeah.
And he'd love it that he doesn't leave us hanging with like, okay, well, there's the earthly wisdom and there's the heavenly wisdom, figure it out. But he tells us what to do. Submit yourselves into God.
Yep.
Resist the devil and he will flee from you. And submitting ourselves is positioning ourselves, is basically saying, I need God. I need you. And it's positioning ourselves under him, submitting ourselves to God. And it's just standing firm against the devil. That means that you just stand firm. And when, it's more like the accuser, when you hear these lies and you hear these temptations, you stand firm in the word. But you got to know what to proclaim. You see Jesus in the garden, he used the word to resist the devil. And that's what we have to do too. But we have to know the word. So we have to, what he says in the next, come near to God and he will come near to you. So if we are staying tucked up under his wing and we're staying in his word and we are praying, we will be like gaining those skills and growing in those skills. It's kind of like when I think about skill, I think of, playing the piano. If I practice and I play on a regular basis, I'm going to be much better at it. Same thing with songwriting, preaching, all of these things that are skills. And with wisdom, it is literally positioning yourself to be with the wise king.
Yep.
I mean, the most wise person in the universe says, hey, come sit and talk with me, and my heart has heard you say, and I'm coming. And we have to position ourselves with the one that has our best interest at heart, the one that knows us best, and the one that will be truthful with us and say, hey, you blew it, let's talk about that. And that's how we develop this kind of wisdom. And it's by submitting ourselves and resisting anything that is in opposition to the will of God. And it's coming near. And I love that little word will, come near, draw near to him, and he will. Not he might, he could, perhaps, but it's he will. And that's just a big promise. If we're going to be able to live our lives with wisdom, we're going to have to be communicating with heaven. We're going to have that perspective, and we can only get that perspective when we draw near to him. And we do that through his word. We do that through listening to sermons. We do that in community with our brothers and sisters. We do that in conversations like we're having. There's so many ways that we can draw near to God, but primarily through his word and through prayer.
It's good. I think that's a good word to end on for sure. So, so good. And so much meat, like I said earlier, on this bone. And I don't know how you're going to preach it all on a Sunday.
I don't either. I'm like, I was listening to you. I thought, well, you just preached this. I think I'm going to have to listen to this podcast a few times. I'll be saying quotes like, oh, Pastor Seth said.
Well, no, it's good. It's so good. And like I said, it's so hard. It's so simple, and it's just so hard to live out. But know that we're praying for you. Know you're not on this journey alone, and know that God desires, like you said, to give us wisdom. And what are we going to do with the wisdom that God gives us? And how we're going to live that out. And man, such a great and powerful message, I think, for the world that we live in today, and for the church. So we do love you. We if you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything you would like to tell us, then feel free to reach out to us. We do have an email account. It's growinghopelivingfaith@gmail.com.
And we have a Facebook account. It's Growing Hope Living Faith Podcast. We would love for you to like our page and to interact with us there. And we would love to hear from you.
That's right. Thank you once again for this conversation. We'll be praying for you, Pastor Rhonda, as you preach this coming up Sunday. Know that we love you all and hope you have a great rest of your week and a great week next week. Grace and peace. God bless. Bye-bye.